As of March 31, 2026, from the Bab el-Mandeb at the southern mouth of the Red Sea to the Strait of Hormuz between Iran and Oman, the world is confronting something the 1980s never truly produced, a linked maritime crisis in which one choke point is already stigmatized, another has flirted with outright closure, and the commercial system now assumes danger before a missile is even launched. This audience should stop and focus on that fact, because the consequence is unprecedented in modern energy politics, a shipping market that has started to reroute itself not after a war is won, but while the risk is still spreading. The U.S. Energy Information Administration says the Bab el-Mandeb's oil flows fell from 8.7 million barrels per day in 2023 to 4.0 million in the first 8 months of 2024, while the International Maritime Organization logged 67 incidents in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden from November 19, 2023 through September 11, 2024. And Reuters reported this month that Red Sea traffic still sits at roughly 60% of pre-October 2023 levels, even after attacks halted last October. That is why this is not a rerun. It is why viewers who want document-based reporting rather than recycled cable chatter should subscribe right now, because the number that changes the whole story arrives in the next chapter, and it explains why the old comparisons are failing. The first thing that establishes credibility is the paper trail, and the paper trail is unusually clear. On December 18, 2023, the Pentagon announced Operation Prosperity Guardian under Combined Task Force 153, publicly naming the United Kingdom, Bahrain, Canada, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Seychelles, and Spain. In January 2024, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 2722 by a recorded vote of 11 in favor, none against, and 4 abstentions, demanding that the Houthis immediately cease attacks on merchant and commercial vessels. The State Department then put the economic stakes in plain language. 15% of international commerce and 30% of global container traffic moves through the Red Sea, and routing around the Cape of Good Hope often adds about 10 days to a voyage. That is not a talking point. That is a timetable, a fuel bill, a crew cost escalation, and an inflation mechanism. If viewers believe maritime security still matters to the price of groceries and medicine in retirement America, this is the right moment to press the like button, because the next section shows why the 1980s analogy is comforting, familiar, and deeply incomplete. The first chapter of the original tanker war begins in a very different world. Iraq started threatening shipping to and from Iranian ports in May 1981. On May 30, 1982, the Turkish tanker Atlas became the first tanker hit during the war while loading at Karg Island. In January 1984, Iraq escalated its naval campaign, and Iran answered by attacking the shipping of Iraq's backers. The antagonists in that earlier story were states with flags, air forces, and conventional military logic. Iraq wanted economic attrition. Iran wanted retaliation and coercive pain for the Gulf monarchies backing Baghdad. Kuwait became the conflicted figure, wealthy enough to matter, exposed enough to panic, and determined enough to seek outside protection. By November 1, 1986, Kuwait was appealing to the international community for help. On March 7, 1987, the United States announced it would reflag Kuwaiti tankers. In July 1987, during the first Ernest Will convoy, one of the escorted tankers hit a mine. In 1988, USS Samuel B. Roberts struck another mine, and 4 days later, Operation Praying Mantis began, helping drive the war toward a ceasefire reached on August 8, 1988. The protagonists in that chapter were not glamorous. They were minesweepers, convoy planners, and naval logisticians trying to keep a narrow waterway functioning under fire. The next chapter matters because the statistic most people remember from the 1980s is the least useful one. What many Americans remember is the drama of flaming tankers, U.S. escorts, and televised maps of the Gulf. What they often do not remember is that the 1980s system bent without fully breaking. According to the Strauss Center's synthesis of the conflict, 61% of the ships attacked during the tanker war were oil tankers, yet only 55 of 239 petroleum tankers, or 23%, were completely sunk or declared constructive total losses, and even at its most intense point, the war failed to disrupt more than 2% of ships passing through the Persian Gulf. The oil market adapted. Iran cut prices to offset insurance premiums. Traffic found ways to keep moving. That is the buried lesson. The old tanker war was violent, but it was still a world in which the market believed mobility would continue. Viewers should weigh in on that before this moves on. Did Washington learn the real lesson of earnest will, or did it learn only the photo-op lesson of destroyers next to tankers? A simple comment is enough. Learned it or forgot it. And if that sounds harsh, the next chapter will show why today's threat is not just about ships being hit. It is about systems deciding they no longer trust the route at all. The next chapter opens on November 19, 2023, when the modern Red Sea crisis begins to accelerate, and the chronology is far more damning than most headline readers realize. The IMO records 67 incidents confirmed by flag states between November 19, 2023, and September 11, 2024, including 14 in December 2023 alone, 10 in February 2024, and 10 more in June 2024. On February 19, 2024, Ruby Mar was struck and later sank on March 2. On March 6, 2024, True Confidence was hit, killing 3 crew members and injuring 4. On June 12, 2024, Tutor was struck by an uncrewed surface device and then by an aerial device. 1 crew member was left unaccounted for, and the vessel sank on June 18. On August 21, 2024, Sunion was attacked, lost engine power, caught fire, and was later boarded on August 23, when explosives were planted aboard. This is the moral dividing line in the present crisis. The protagonists are not empires hunting prestige. They are civilian mariners, port operators, and the dull institutional machinery that keeps food, medicine, and fuel moving. The antagonists are political actors weaponizing civilian transit itself. The conflicted figures are governments that condemn the attacks but hesitate to commit the force structure needed to defeat them. Viewers who want the next phase of this story before the talking heads catch up should subscribe again here, because now the map shifts from violence to math, and the math is why this crisis is different. Here is the number that turns tanker war nostalgia into strategic malpractice. In 2024, the Strait of Hormuz still carried 20 million barrels per day, equal to about 20% of global petroleum liquids consumption and more than 1/4 of total global seaborne oil trade. Around 1/5 of global LNG trade also passed through Hormuz in 2024, primarily from Qatar. EIA estimates that 84% of crude oil and condensate and 83% of LNG moving through Hormuz went to Asian markets in 2024, with China, India, Japan, and South Korea accounting for a combined 69% of Hormuz crude and condensate flows to Asia. Saudi Arabia alone accounted for 38% of total Hormuz crude flows, about 5.5 million barrels per day, and the bypass options are thinner than political reassurance suggests. Saudi and UAE pipelines together offer an estimated 2.6 million barrels per day of available spare capacity to route around Hormuz in an emergency, a fraction of what normally moves through the strait. This is why the crisis is different. In the 1980s, the core story was how to protect tankers in one war zone. In 2026, the story is how a damaged Red Sea and a threatened Hormuz combine into a stacked choke point system with limited bypass, heavy Asian dependence, and instant consequences for freight, energy, and insurance pricing. If viewers want this kind of breaking news analysis before it becomes tomorrow's consensus, that is the second like-worthy moment and the third reason to subscribe. Now the escalation begins in the present tense, and this is where the old comparison starts to collapse in real time. Now ship owners remember the Red Sea and refuse to believe official optimism. Now insurers price recurrence, not headlines. Now the Pentagon discovers that saying freedom of navigation is easier than physically restoring it. Reuters reported on March 10, 2026, that the US Navy had refused near-daily shipping industry requests for escorts through Hormuz because the risk of attack was still too high, according to 3 shipping industry sources familiar with the matter. Reuters also reported that hundreds of ships remained anchored while traffic through the strait had all but halted, preventing exports of around 1/5 of the world's oil supply. Then comes revelation number 2. The problem is not just escorting ships, but surviving the geometry of the strait. Reuters reported on March 25 that the danger zone around Hormuz is up to 5 times bigger than the Houthi attack area around Bab el-Mandeb. Revelation number 3. the adversary is stronger. Unlike the Houthis, Iran brings professional forces, coastal access, mines, missiles, drones, and hidden stockpiles. Revelation number 4, even a destroyer has limits. As Reuters quoted SSY analysts, a destroyer can intercept missiles but cannot simultaneously sweep mines, counter drone boat swarms from multiple bearings, and manage GPS disruption. And revelation number 5 may be the most important of all. The Red Sea operation did not create restored confidence. Reuters reported that despite billions spent and more than $1 billion in weapons expended, the route still remains broadly avoided. This audience should understand what that means. The lesson of the last 2 years is not that the West did nothing. It is that tactical success did not restore commercial trust. The next revelation lands hardest on the institutional question. In the 1980s, convoy escort was the model, and everyone knew it. In this crisis, even the experts are warning that patrolling a danger zone is not the same as controlling it. USNI reported that Vice Admiral Brad Cooper told senators in June 2025 that if Iran mined Hormuz, restoring freedom of navigation could take months, not days, because mine warfare is a slow, complex problem. USNI also highlighted a critique from the confirmation process that Operation Prosperity Guardian demonstrated that patrolling in a danger zone is no substitute for convoy escorting. Reuters, meanwhile, reported that some analysts believe securing Hormuz could require as many as a dozen large warships backed by jets, drones, and helicopters, and that in some places the Iranian shoreline sits so close that drones could swarm a vessel in 5 to 10 minutes. That is not an old tanker war. That is a compressed contest between a just-in-time world economy and a layered anti-access threat. Viewers should make the second choice in the comments right now. Does this end in deterrence, or does it harden into a new normal of escorted scarcity? And viewers who do not want to depend on algorithmic luck for the next update should subscribe one more time, because the final section puts probabilities on the table, and the deadline is not theoretical. The next several weeks decide whether temporary rerouting becomes permanent habit. The most likely scenario, at about 45%, is managed coercion, partial naval protection, selective convoying, continued war risk pricing, and a divided map in which some energy cargoes return under guard while container traffic remains cautious and expensive. The second scenario, at 35%, is prolonged semi-closure, not a total stop, but a dragged-out regime of anchorage delays, emergency surcharges, rerouting around Africa, and persistent inflationary pressure as insurers, charterers, and refiners build risk into every contract. The third scenario, at 20%, is broader military shock, one catastrophic strike on a major tanker, LNG vessel, or escorting warship that forces an overt escalation and resets the market again. Those percentages are analytical judgments, but they are anchored in the evidence already on the table. Hormuz still handles around 20 million barrels per day, bypass capacity is limited, route stigma outlasts the shooting, and even experts sympathetic to Western power warn that restoring safe passage could take months. In other words, the deadline pressure is real. Every week this drags on. Confidence decays faster than official statements can rebuild it. So the synthesis is blunt. The Tanker War 2.0 is different from the 1980s because the enemy network is broader, the weapons are cheaper and more precise, the shipping system is more integrated and more psychology-driven, and the political cost of hesitation arrives faster. In the old war, the market still believed passage would continue. In this one, the market can decide a route is guilty until proven safe. That is broader than oil. It touches food aid, medicine, manufacturing schedules, retirement portfolios, freight inflation, alliance credibility, and the basic question of whether advanced states can still secure the commons they claim to lead. This audience should not let this vanish into the next news cycle. It should be shared off-platform, emailed to friends, texted to family, and saved for the next time somebody on television says this is just like the 1980s. It is not. And if viewers want continuing coverage built around documents, timelines, and accountable probabilities, not theatrical certainty, they should subscribe before leaving. Because the real cliffhanger is no longer whether another ship gets hit. It is whether the world's leading naval powers can still persuade the commercial world to believe them when they say a sea lane is open.